Hello everyone, welcome to the new video where I'm going to be talking about all the movies that I watched in theaters in July of 2026. I started off the month with Baby Do Die Do. This was a fun theatrical experience. A Hindi film starring a deaf and mute female assassin? Hell yeah. Its neon-lit vision of a rainy Mumbai is the perfect setting for this stylish and colorful film with some inventive filmmaking that makes it look and feel like a moving comic book. I just wish the film wasn't a mess though. Don't get me wrong, it's got tons of fascinating and interesting ideas, secret underground gay bars, umbrella guns, and a hierarchy of hitmen working for gangsters. It's even got several colorful characters that really make this film feel like a vintage and pulpy noir thriller. There is a lot to like. But the screenplay just doesn't know what to do with most of these characters. Little time is spent in the world building and fleshing out these characters' relationships. The film feels aimless and structureless after one point. Random events just sort of happen one after the other. But because the proper character work isn't done, I just didn't care. Many scenes play out for too long, characters conveniently get out of situations in a way that feels forced and contrived. Instead of fully fleshing out this world and its characters, the film treads a safe and predictable storyline of betrayal and revenge. Even the film's excessive use of voiceover becomes overbearingly annoying after one point. It feels like the film isn't entirely confident and feels the need to hold the audience's hand throughout every step. It's these elements that bring down what could have been a really entertaining film. It's not that bad if I'm being honest. The way the filmmaking plays with its style by using split screens, on-screen text, and a fun throwback to silent cinema definitely gives the film a charm and personality. Visually, it's a feast to look at, and it's super cool to see a noir action film where a woman is at the forefront of the narrative. But I just wish the film was much more cohesive with its characters and ideas. Given the incredibly low bar set by the current state of Hindi cinema, this film is much better than what we get nowadays, but I still find it to be an ambitiously flawed mess that I wanted to enjoy more than I actually did. Still, I consider this to be a step in the right direction. We have had more than enough testosterone-filled movies starring violent men. I think it's about time we get to see women frequently lead this genre too. Alpha. Yeah, this was just about as mediocre as I expected it to be. Nothing offensively terrible or atrocious, just passable as a decent action flick. Not to say that it does not have a few things going for it. Alia and Sharvari are convincing as action leading ladies. Half of the action sequences are actually pretty well shot and choreographed, and the background music is perfectly serviceable in amping up the stakes. But of course, this film has a ton of problems. The lack of fleshed out characters, cringy dialogues, a generic villain, and a predictable storyline prevents this from standing out as something memorable. It actually has some interesting ideas with classic commercial cinema tropes that would have worked if the film executed it with unabashed conviction. Instead, it's so unconfident in its own ideas that the film is undercooked. The filmmaking is average, half the time it's shot like an advertisement with its flashy lighting and comical close-ups of jarring product placements. But the frequent use of quick cuts affects the editing of the domestic non-action scenes where no moment is allowed to truly breathe. The film keeps jumping between countries and flashbacks, but we're not given enough time to feel anything. I don't even want to have to point out all the plot contrivances and logical loopholes because it's inherently a deeply silly film, and towards the end the film picks the lowest hanging fruit by injecting pointless jingoism that barely had anything to do with the primary story. Despite how messy and cringe it all is, it's at this point where the film truly lost me. The film is confused about what it truly wants to be. Does it want to be a slick espionage film about a family torn apart? Does it want to be a film that challenges the ethics of serum-enhanced super soldiers? Does it want to be a film about one's love for their country? It's not impossible to make a coherent film that's about all of these things, but the film tries so hard to be everything that in the end, it's about nothing. There is a pointless cameo that I did not mind too much but was essentially completely pointless narratively. Supposedly smart secret agents and killer assassins constantly make really stupid decisions that make no sense for their character. Overall, the film is an unsurprising mess of interesting ideas and tropes that actually had potential. Now, despite all of this, I actually had a decent time in the theaters. The film is watchable amidst all of its flaws. Yes, there are much greater standards to be achieved, but given just the amount of garbage that comes out of Hindi cinema these days, this isn't the worst thing to have come out of that system. It's sad that the bar is this low, but I hope we can come out of this slump eventually. But considering everything, it was pretty cool to see Alia and Sharvari kick ass together. They are highly capable performers who I would love to see star in a film again. I just hope they get better material to work with because they deserved much better than whatever it is we got. The Death of Robin Hood. I was fascinated to see a new and darker take on the fabled legend Robin Hood, and given that it was made by the director of Pig and A Quiet Place Day One, I was curious to see this filmmaker tackle this specific subject matter. Thankfully, he's done an excellent job. I would probably call this my favorite film of his at the moment. This film is intensely dark, brooding, gritty, and just downright grim at times, heavily reminiscent of films like Logan and The Northman. With its depiction of an old and cynical Hugh Jackman quietly murdering people amidst the misty fog, it's hard not to see the potential influences. But the film is quick in effectively establishing its mood and tone. It's low on dialogue and plot and heavy on atmosphere. But the film's shift into a much more meditative pace and self-reflective tone is the film's biggest gamble in my opinion. One that I personally could get behind, for I found it to be a fascinating creative decision. The violence and the anger slowly wear off. It's replaced by something much more warm and empathetic, leaving us with the permanent scars of the past that remind Robin of who he was, or maybe still is. The sudden tonal shift could be alienating to many viewers, for the film doesn't reveal any intentions of returning to that brutality. It uses its first act to contrast it with the rest of the movie. We're given ample time to really sit with the atrocities and contemplate about the cost of bloodshed. But despite the halt in pace and the introduction of genuine warmth, the film partly remains to be a grim and difficult watch, for it uses this newfound time to be observant, patient, remorseful, and highly contemplative. There's a lot of death and regret. There are monsters within Robin that he can't escape from. Maybe Robin is the monster. And amidst the gruesomeness and cynicism, this film also has a beating heart that's longing for peace and quiet. That's longing to let go of the cyclical nature of violent tendencies and aims to end the cycle through love. It's the exploration of these very themes that really made the film an ultimately moving piece. Yes, the filmmaking is spectacular, the imagery is breathtaking, the action sequences are meticulously choreographed and agonizing to witness, but the more quieter scenes also have an innate beauty to them. The sound design is immaculate, and there are even a few cerebral sequences that took me back to Nolan's Oppenheimer. But still, this is easily one of the best movies of the year, and I am very glad to have gotten to see this in theaters. I Nobody. I went into this film without any expectations and walked out pretty entertained. I found the premise to be very interesting, and as everyone has been saying, the first half of the film is pretty solid. It's got great characters that seem very exciting and promising, and unsurprisingly, the second half does squander its potential. I thought the movie looked pretty flat for the most part. Its lighting and production design is average, but whatever the film lacked in how it looked, it more than made up for with its incredible sound design. Even its use of a loud background score to elevate scenes worked initially, but became overbearing and overused later on. I was also pretty split on the filmmaking. In parts, it was genuinely splendid, with clever use of camera movements, focus shifts, and reflections that made me giddy when they seldom showed up. But otherwise, it's just pretty standard stuff that doesn't do much to really make the visual grammar of the film stand out in any way. The film is out to explore fascinating themes of man's innate greed, how a seemingly ordinary man navigates complications because he happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, mixed family dynamics, and how media and politics sensationalize everything. All of these ideas are terrific and sound very promising, but primarily in the second half is where the film becomes way too overstuffed and messy to truly explore any of these themes with real gravitas. Yes, the filmmaking is fast-paced and loud, but I found myself wanting to feel more. I wanted to know the characters a bit more. I wanted to truly feel the stakes and escalation. But I feel like approaching this film with a commercial masala lens might have hindered the storytelling, because while it has some decent action sequences, their place in the story felt forced. Though the story does have the potential to be told as a mass movie, I feel like the execution made me more curious to see a stripped-down version of the film. The plot becomes incredibly convoluted, with characters making ridiculous decisions that were hard to believe. Several characters enter the story too late and do little to justify their existence in the story, and towards the end, the film becomes about something else entirely, almost completely losing vision of its central conceit. All in all, I found this to be a fun and decently well-made film with tons of promise that turned out to be cluttered and messy in its execution. Evil Dead Burn. This was about as average as I thought it would be, but it's still very fun. The setting, plot, and narrative progression is as generic as it gets. The interpersonal dynamics are serviceable enough, but it's also got some semi-inventive filmmaking and creative kills that are gory and nasty. Watching this in a packed theater on a Sunday night probably elevated the experience for me, because it briefly made me forget how mediocre the script was, and though it was entertaining, it added nothing interesting, new, or substantial to this franchise. Still, I don't mind seeing a couple of these films every few years as long as it's helmed by different directors. It's nowhere near my favorite film series, but one I don't mind seeing. Minions and monsters. I don't have much to say about this, but never in a million years did I think that I would enjoy the new Minions movie. But I guess the only way to trick me into watching these films is by making it a love letter to cinema. And man, did I have an absolutely delightful time with the movies. The Invite. This was one of my most anticipated films recently, and I am so glad that it turned out to be this fucking good because this is an incredible movie. Everyone here is at their A game. The performances are wonderful, Seth Rogen especially is truly hilarious. The film is incredibly funny. The entire theater was laughing at all the jokes at all the right moments. Olivia Wilde gives not only a solid performance, but she is a fantastic director too, as the film contains some really mature and inventive filmmaking aided by witty and snappy dialogue that keeps the audience on their toes. The film looks gorgeous as well. The 35mm print really makes every shot and frame look and feel intentional in its choices, and the score does a great job at ratcheting tension and externalizing the characters' inner feelings in a way that's both awkward and comedic. The film works as a stage play essentially, since it primarily just contains 4 characters in a single location in a story that takes place in just one night, but it's exactly these very simple elements that elevate the material. The narrative progression of the film is rapid and cringy, I mean that in a good way, that takes the audience and characters into uncomfortable and exciting places. But the strong performers and confident filmmaking make everything incredibly watchable and entertaining, but the film never loses sight of its beating heart and ultimate thesis. Seeing this film in a packed theater on a Sunday evening made it one of my most cherished movie-going experiences in recent times. It reminded me of why the communal experience of seeing a movie is truly unmatched. I am so glad that I loved this film as much as I did, and I am very curious to see what Wilde does next. And then I watched The Odyssey. This was my most anticipated movie of the whole year. I've been waiting to see this movie ever since I heard about it getting made. Christopher Nolan is one of my most favorite filmmakers working today, and every one of his new releases is rightfully no less than an event. But I went in with incredibly high expectations because of the names behind it. Thankfully, those expectations were met. The Odyssey is a tremendously epic spectacle in every sense of the word. It's not surprising in the least, but Nolan successfully delivers on making this film feel like the biggest and most important thing you are seeing in that moment. Its filmmaking and storytelling approach harkens back to the old Hollywood spectacles that feels like it's from an old era long gone that's being kept alive by Nolan's ambition. This sense of scope and scale doesn't only come from its filmmaking, but also the fact that it's a story that contains multiple characters, gods, monsters, and several narratives from different perspectives that span decades. Despite the film being a 3-hour beast with all of these various elements, funnily enough, it's also one of Nolan's most straightforward films, and Jennifer Lame's terrific editing managed to weave all of these characters and storylines into one seamless, epic narrative. Each and every one of the cast members are delivering some of their career best performances. You can tell that they feel incredibly lucky and privileged to be on a Nolan set and are delivering their A game. No one stood out like a sore thumb, ranging from the leading celebrity star cast to the briefly shown but memorable supporting characters. Everyone is committed to bringing out their absolute best here. Ludwig's score is unsurprisingly mesmerizing. It's a given that he is easily one of, if not the best movie composer working today. His longevity comes from the fact that he doesn't just compose great soundtracks, but that all of his soundtracks are also uniquely different from each other. His music perfectly serves the film it's a part of, while also sounding like nothing you've ever quite heard before. The fact that instead of using a traditional orchestra, which also would have sounded great by the way, Ludwig and his team reconstructed period-accurate musical instruments to ground us in that time, which speaks to the level of care and detail that was put into making this film. He manages to use these ancient instruments to create unique and interesting sounds that still make us feel the grandiosity of this larger-than-life tale. And though some may clown on Nolan's insistence on using as little VFX as possible, it's that very approach that makes his films look and feel so tangible. Nolan understands that it's vital for the audience to truly feel immersed in the world of his film, and he's one of the few filmmakers that understands that sometimes great VFX is often always in collaboration with carefully planned practical effects. That is also why I was purely dumbfounded in several sequences where I was just confused and enthralled as to just how they pulled it all off. And yes, it's incredible that they actually built a 60-foot tall puppet of the Cyclops. It's insanely ambitious to shoot almost everything for real using state-of-the-art 70mm IMAX film cameras for the entirety of the movie. But none of those fancy things would mean much if what we saw wasn't worth it, and man oh man was every single frame a privilege to witness. But even his use of restraint in several scenes showcased Nolan's maturity as a storyteller. He knows exactly when to tell and show us things and when to hold back for us to fill in on the rest. All of this talk about the technical aspect of the film being staggeringly good, but what several blockbusters often struggle with is crafting an engaging story with emotionally compelling characters that we root and care for. And though The Odyssey is a complete knockout in the technical regard, this film also nails its emotional and thematic core with precision as sharp as Odysseus' aim. None of the spectacle on screen would matter if you didn't care about the people experiencing it, but this film's scale and attention to its characters transport you to this time and place with ease. The film's choice to not show the gods in physical form is a risky move that pays off because it grounds the film by staying in the human's perspective. We may not see the gods, well, most of them, but we definitely feel their presence throughout the story, and that's arguably more impactful than showing them directly. Plus, the third act of the film genuinely had me levitating. Not a single second of the film was boring for me, but when that final act began, I just knew that I was in for a good fucking time. Because it is when all the tiny narrative threads began to pay off and we got the emotional catharsis we had been waiting for. It's nuts how the climax of the film legit plays out like a commercial masala movie. Its use of build-up, elevation and mass moments was so strong that it was the one and only scene where my entire hall erupted into cheers and applause. But one thing I was curious about was what was Nolan trying to say through this story? Why did this particular story fascinate him? How does it relate to our current times? Sure, it does work as a summer blockbuster with the newest and fanciest technology used to its limits, but what is it exactly that the film is trying to convey with its star-studded cast and all of its lavishly modern gadgetry? It's around the third act where the point of the film hit me. Nolan talks about the laws of kindness and hospitality and how breaking that trust can set a chain reaction that can affect the entire world for the worse. It's about how seemingly clever but manipulative tactics can cause the downfall of civilizations. It's about how our own hubris is what regresses us as a society. And in that way, this film is surprisingly a perfect companion piece to his previous feature Oppenheimer, where it is also about a guilt-ridden protagonist who is haunted by and regretful for his own genius that completely changes the world he lives in for the worse. It's that interpretation of Homer's text from Nolan that makes this specific retelling so fascinating. It speaks to what is of primary interest to him amidst the magnitude of such a monumental story. I was baffled by how Nolan even managed to find and weave this thematic thread amidst this giant canvas of a film, because it is what precisely makes the story so timeless in nature. It's no small task to take a 3,000-year-old tale and find a way to make it not just palatable, but relevant to our current day and age. It's also very telling of how little we have grown and evolved as a species. Christopher Nolan is way past the point of proving himself as one of the world's finest directors, but this film somehow makes that case even more solid because he still got it. Apart from his mastery of the craft, it's his willingness to challenge himself and try out differently unique films that prevents him from getting stale as an artist. The Odyssey feels like the most Christopher Nolan movie ever made because you see all of the concepts and ideas that he has tackled in his earlier films come together here, but in a way where he doesn't simply recycle those ideas. Instead, he finds a way to combine several new thematic concerns and weave them so seamlessly in such a way that makes the story feel rich in texture, emotion, scope, and scale. And if I had to pinpoint any issues with the film, it would probably have to be the bits in the editing where I felt like the cuts were just too quick, either during a conversation between two characters or when establishing a location through a stunning wide shot. And the jam-packed exposition in the first act can be a little tricky to get past initially, but I honestly would be nitpicking if I were to ramble about this any further. But yeah, it was no surprise to me that this movie turned out to be so great, but it's still a wonderful feeling when a film that you have anticipated seeing for a very long time doesn't just live up to your expectations, but exceeds it. I already knew that this was going to be the case, but amidst all the great films I have watched this year, this is easily my favorite. It's going to be incredibly hard to top this, but I welcome others to try. Let's see if they're worthy enough to shoot the arrow through the axis. After that, I rewatched The Odyssey, but in a regular screen, not in IMAX, and I still had a terrific experience. So guys, if you cannot see the film in IMAX, just see it in any way that you can. The film's quality surpasses the format it's playing in. And after that, I ended the month with Spider-Man Brand New Day. Spider-Man is my personal favorite fictional character of all time, and I'm never going to miss any of his movies in theaters. And though I have had a rocky relationship with MCU Spider-Man in particular, I have generally liked all of his films despite my issues with them. And I was in the minority when the trailers for Brand New Day had me worried and skeptical, whereas everyone else was elated and excited. Still, I went inside the theater hoping to like it. I mean, who doesn't want a good Spider-Man movie? And I am so glad to report to you that I found this to be pretty great. Like everyone is saying, this is one of the best live action Spider-Man movies that we have seen in years. It feels so refreshing to see the MCU finally understand this character and what makes him tick. It's not that the previous Watch trilogy got him entirely wrong, but this film completely nails the interpretation of the character to a T. This film improves upon the earlier installments in several aspects. First of all, it steps up its game in the technical regard. This is one of the better looking MCU films. Instead of muddy and grey visuals in order to maintain tonal consistency with every other Marvel film, this one has its own unique look to it. It feels dark and gritty while still being vibrant. It has actual color, contrast, and shadows that adds a sense of tangible texture that many superhero movies lack these days. And though it has some choppy VFX and obvious green screen in moments, the overall special effects are expectedly solid. Michael Giacchino takes his existing score and refurbishes it to make it sound familiar but new. But the sheer upgrade in the quality of the filmmaking is what truly stood out here. This film has an actual directorial voice and intent that consistently permeates throughout the film. It puts us into the subjective perspective of Peter and what he is going through. Those moments of intimacy are captured with grit and sensitivity, but the real step up is in how director Destin Daniel Cretton shoots the action sequences. He managed to induce the thrill and excitement I had felt in Raimi's action set pieces. And not only does Spider-Man's choreography here feel much more tactile and creative, but the swinging sequences are breathtaking to witness. I've always complained about the sense of removed objectivity of Spidey's swinging in the Watch trilogy, but here Destin finds new and interesting angles that makes us feel like we are swinging with Spidey. It takes a lot from the Amazing Spider-Man 2's playbook with the ripples on his suit as he falls, the Snorri Cam-esque footage where you feel the weight of a human as he reacts with physical elements while swinging, all with interesting and unique camera angles that I hadn't seen in any Spider-Man film before. There are certain frames that are direct homages to comic book panels, and I loved seeing a comic book movie actually embrace its roots. Another criticism I had with the earlier films was that Spidey almost always looked like a weightless CG model being flung around. I would see so many set photos with Tom wearing an actual beautiful looking suit, but in the final film it would get covered up completely with VFX, and thankfully here you can actually see and feel the suit he is wearing. Of course he is CG at times, but in the ordinary scenes you can tell that that is a real, practical and tangible suit that Tom was wearing. Plus, Spidey actually feels like a New York superhero in this film. The city feels like a lived-in character with style and texture, and we get to see Spidey saving regular civilians. That's something we don't quite see in superhero films these days. But getting to see it again in this film honestly felt quite refreshing. All of these elements were enough to impress me, but this film also excels with its characterization of its protagonist. Here, we return to the roots of what makes this character so great. We see Peter's crippling loneliness and isolation that comes with being a superhero. He shoulders heavy responsibility, especially after the ending of No Way Home, and we see what mental and physical toll that takes on him. It takes what worked best about the best superhero film Spider-Man 2 and incorporates it well into its own story. Tom Holland has always been a great actor, but here is where he truly gets to flex his acting muscles, because we don't just see a version of the character that's funny and quips around, but one that is dealing with a lot of internal pressure, as the best interpretations of this character always has. It's what grounds him and makes him feel like a real person. I was worried that the inclusion of other popular Marvel characters like the Punisher and Hulk would take away from the street level nature of what I had hoped the story would be, but surprisingly this film maintains being a grounded Spider-Man film with their presence. Though it may not seem like it initially, these characters had thematic significance to the story and Peter's overall journey. Since the villain is deliberately kept under wraps in the trailers, and though we all know who it is, I won't spoil anything about it, and while it isn't the best Spidey villain we have seen in film, it certainly works for what this film is trying to explore, about themes of loneliness and social exclusion, about ensuring that the world doesn't turn us into a monster, and that the bravest thing we can do in hard times is reach out to others. There were certain moments towards the third act of the film that had the entire hall erupting, and it wasn't just because whatever we were seeing on screen was cool, but also because the film had done the work needed to make its emotional payoff work in the context of the scene. It actually earns those cheers by getting to that high point with its stellar writing and filmmaking. Despite the clunkiness of the plot mechanics and the slightly predictable nature of the structure of the film, it never loses sight of its emotional core. Amidst all the funny jokes and well-directed action sequences, this film nails the heartfelt moments with unabashed sincerity that we don't see in superhero films these days. The film even handles some narrative through lines with a certain level of maturity that I honestly did not expect. It knows what we as an audience would want and how we would want those situations to ideally play out. It even toys with those expectations in a few scenes, but the film knows what's best for the story and characters, and I respect its ability to stick to its guns and go for it with confidence in its creative choices. I found this to be not just an entertaining but moving watch. It manages to weave in a new and effective journey for Peter at this stage of his life, and while its handling might be a little too heavy-handed, you can tell that this is one of the few Marvel films that was actually made with care. There is a real sense of passion and earnestness bursting at the seams, and that honestly makes me forgive what little flaws I had with it. Bold and flashy headlines like, "This is the best MCU movie" or "This is the best Spider-Man movie" are overreaching claims that I don't want to fall for and personally disagree with. I think that, although great, this is far from the best MCU film and probably the best live-action Spidey film since probably Spider-Man 3, and after much rumination, I currently like this a tad bit more than Homecoming, though it could also be my recency bias talking, who knows. But despite everything, I am just glad that we got a great movie. Given all the concerns and skepticisms I had with it, I am so glad to have been proven wrong. I genuinely did not expect for it to be this good, but it's nice to feel surprised every once in a while. This film's greatest achievement is perfectly picking up the baton from No Way Home, crafting a perfectly entertaining and emotionally effective film, and leaving me curious and excited to see Peter's next journey. So yeah, these are all the films that I watched in theaters in the month of July. And here are the films ranked from best to worst. So yeah, that was what I watched this month. Not a super packed month at the movies as it can get sometimes, but that's fine because I'll get to rewatch some of them later on. I wouldn't say that it was an overall terrific month for the movies, but there were some great ones in here that made everything worth it. I'm mainly just happy that the Odyssey lived up to my expectations and that the new Spider-Man movie turned out to be great. Now, here are the end of the video lists for July. So these are the films I missed out this month, what I was interested in, and these are the films that I missed out on that I was not interested in. These are the expected hits, these are the expected flops, these are the pleasant surprises, these are the disappointments, these are the films I plan to see next month, and these are the same films ranked in order of excitement. And just because I watched the new Spider-Man movie, here is my maybe not controversial Spider-Man movie ranking. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, support the channel. It means the world to me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.